Are you someone who deals with a knee valgus or knock knees? Well, if so, this video is going to be for you. We're gonna get into some of the underlying reasons as to why your knees might be presenting themselves in this position and what it is exactly you can do about it. So what exactly is a knee valgus? And is it something that you should be concerned with? Well, in its most simple terms, what a knee valgus is these bones, your femurs, are presenting themselves in a more internal rotation. And then as a byproduct of that, because things don't just move typically on their own, the bones beneath them, your tibias, typically start to move into external rotation. And what you may find with your feet is that they will present themselves in more of a pronated or more of a flat foot position. Now, if you find yourself in this position, does it mean that you're broken? Does it mean that you're due for a knee surgery guaranteed later in life? Not necessarily. Obviously, there are varying degrees into which the knees can valgus, but we have to keep in mind is that the more that the joints do tend to go away from neutral, typically the more strain we're going to be putting not only on the musculature, but also things like the ligaments and tendons. And in my opinion, the risk for injury starts to go up as a byproduct of that. So these certainly are some factors that we want to keep in mind. And some of the reasons as to why this might be happening is a few different reasons. There's a couple different ideas around your adductors, maybe being overactive, which is kind of pulling the femur into an internal rotation. It could be weak external rotator, so you can't support this type of femoral positioning. Some people think that it's a tight IT band. My sense from working with people who have had knee valgus is it's not just one of these, it's likely a combination of all of them. And also how the pelvis kind of plays a role as to how the femurs are going to present themselves. If I'm more in a anteriorly tilted position, this is going to bias more internal rotation of my femurs anatomically. So these are all things that we're going to want to keep in mind, and we're going to try to target all of these broadly in the exercises that we're going to get into right now. So for our first exercise, we're going to be working through a lunge. So what you're going to need for this is something to potentially balance yourself with. This can be a dowel, a broomstick, a wall, and just a small stepper for our back foot to be on. So what this is going to look like is you're going to be taking your back foot onto the box, and you are going to try to limit the amount of weight that you have through your back foot. Think 5 to 10% maybe of your total body weight. We're really going to try to have this as a lead leg dominant exercise. Now, what we're going to do from here is we're going to start by getting a good amount of weight on this lead leg. And we're going to start by rotating our right hip back. And what we're trying to do in this hip rotation, if my knee does tend to be more in a internal rotation or that knee valgus position, the action of me pulling my right hip back is going to pull this femur out. So we're actually taking it into more external rotation and even a little bit of abduction. So once I have that set, try to limit using your dowel or your broomstick as little as possible, just as needed. And you're going to start to drop your hips down, keeping most of your center of mass on top of this lead leg. Now comes the important part. So we're in our loaded phase here at the bottom. You're seated into that right hip. And what we're going to try to do is maintain this line of tension between our hip and our foot. So my foot is directly pointed towards you. I'm going to slowly start to press down. And as I stand up, I'm trying to keep that whole line of tension. We're trying to condition our body that when we're coming out of this phase, that the knee doesn't have to dip in. We can actually work on conditioning the musculature and this joint positioning to work with us to support all the joints in good alignment. And that way, when we actually go to move and walk around, we've taught our body where we want tension to be. And this is specifically training our walking pattern. When I come into a right hip rotation, this whole line of tension can be intact to then propel me forward versus knee collapsing in. What I'd suggest in terms of reps here is working through anywhere between about 8 to 12 reps, and the tempo is going to be really important. So you're going to come down nice and slow through the eccentric over about 3 to 5 seconds, trying to feel those lines of tension. And then you're trying to use those lines of tension to stand yourself back up over about a 3 to 4 second window. We're trying to do so with some decent control so that we allow our nervous system and our whole body to get used to where we want tension to be anchored into and how to actually use that to take us through a range of motion. So using that same box and same dowel or wall, we are going to work through some abduction. One of the reasons as to why you're coming into this valgus position could be due to a lack of ability to really create tension through the external rotators and we'll say just broadly speaking, the abductors. So we are going to come up onto the box or the stool. Again, you're going to try to limit how much you're using this stick. And we're going to find a similar seated position into the hips. So you can think you're almost going into like a half lunge here. So I have my hips seated down into my left in this case, being mindful that as you're sitting the hips back, this knee isn't caving in. So we're going to try to keep this in good alignment, really between the foot and the hip. And then we're going to start to challenge abduction of this right leg moving outward. So my right leg is going to move outward, and then we are going to be challenging all the abductors on this closed chain leg, our left side. So I'm going to reach, 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 and then we're going to do a slow reset coming back in. You can even bias a slight hip rotation to the left here, and really you're just going to try to sustain that while you work as much range of motion through that right leg as you can, again, without allowing this knee to start to cave in. Be mindful here with the upper body that you're not doing anything too weird. We're just going to try to stay more or less upright while you work that reach. You have that stability, and you're just working this range of motion through abduction and adduction on your right side. What I'd recommend here in terms of rep range is about the same tempo, 3 to 5 seconds coming out, big stretch as much as you can. Hold that for 1 to 2. Come back over 3 to 4, and you're gonna work anywhere between about 8 to 12 repetitions as you're going through this as well. If you are executing this well, you should feel like this standing leg is really working. Specifically, this whole outer or lateral line of that left leg, we're really trying to establish good sensation and integrity between that outer hip all the way down to the outer edge of that left foot. For this last exercise, we're going to work through something very simple, but very effective as it relates to addressing a knee valgus or knock knees. And it's really just building on our previous 2 exercises in a more dynamic way. So what we're going to work through is a walking lunge, just body weight. You can add some weight if you would like via a medicine ball or dumbbells, but it's certainly not necessary. So what we're going to do to start is we're going to come back to our split stance position, exactly as we were doing in our lunge, and we're going to drop down into said lunge. What we're going to do now is we're going to stand up. I'm going to take a step forward into my left side. It's going to be a catch, and then we're going to step back into the right. So in this case, I'm getting used to the push off my right leg, and then catching and absorbing with good stability and coordination of this left side. So as I'm catching on my left side, I'm being mindful that I don't find myself here. We're really going to try to emphasize this hip rotation on the way down. Again, because that is going to assist in keeping the external rotators and the abductors online, which is going to assist in us getting out of that internal rotation. So as I catch, I rotate into the hip. I have good alignment here. I step back, lunge down, get everything loaded, and now I'm mindful here that this isn't caving in as I'm taking my step up and forward. So I'm using that whole line of feedback that we used. It's a catch and a catch. And see if you can just get a good rhythm going kind of back and forth here on that one side. I'd work about 8 to 12 reps here, and then you switch that up. So then you'd go to your left side, exact same idea, and then you're getting used to the catch on the right and the push off from your left. So we got our lunges, we have our abduction, and then we have working that dynamically. If knee valgus is something that is causing you pain or discomfort, it is certainly something that you're going to want to explore and I think work through on a little bit of a deeper level. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're bound for surgery or that your knees are going to blow up. So just be intentional as you work through these exercises. Go to what your pain threshold is if you are experiencing pain. There's no reason to move beyond that. And if you wanted more information, not only around your knees, but also your upper body and how the whole system can integrate and work as a unit, you can check out a free program that I put together called the Core 7 down in the description below. As always, I appreciate your time, and go check out a video that I did right here that the YouTube algorithm thinks you'll enjoy. I'll see you there.